Renato Berzolla. I was born in Borgotaro, Italy in 1940. My mother told me always that I was a byproduct of the war because they got scared one night and I was born 9 months later. Before I talk about the war, I like to refer to something I read on the Wall Street Journal last week. It was about Randy Zuckerberg, the sister of Mark, the founder and the CEO of AOL. She wrote a book entitled Pick 3. She had 5 areas of her life, which, if I recall, was family, friends, fitness, work, and sleep. I know what I would pick in my life as the 3 most important areas that guide me throughout my life. Mine would be family, would be faith, and would be work. So that's really to tell a little bit about my story and where I come from. It was a difficult time for us, even though I was I remember the last 2 years of the war, the 1944 and 1945. My family had to move from Borgotaro to the mountains to a small town called Brunelli. And we were called in Borgotarese Sfola. Sfola means that you have to leave your house when you don't, not because of a choice, but because something is happening. So we moved to the small town called Brunelli. It was my aunt's house. So it was a big house. So other families from Borgotaro asked to come to live there. And we obviously said yes. And I remember that we had only 1 room to sleep. And there were 9 of us, because that was the situation during the war. My father was already an elderly person, because I was born when he was 58 years old. So was not called to the army, so he stayed around the house. For some reason, because something happened between the partisans and the SS, they took all men prisoners, and they took my father too. And they took him down to Borgotaro, and they put him in this hotel, which is today still there, is the Albergo Roma. And my mother used to take me from Brunelli, which is about 4 or 5 miles away, down to see my father. We could not go to see him in the room, but he would appear at one of the windows and just wave to us. The SS would offer me, I always remember, candies. And my mother said, do not take candies. They must be poisoned. I don't think they were, but that's the way people thought at that time. People who did not have anything to eat. We were lucky enough because my parents had a farm 100 miles away, so we could get food. People came who didn't have anything to eat. They didn't have to ask my mother. She gave it to them. That's the type of family I grew up with. We always shared that with everybody else, and we were known for that. So, but that's what was important in my life, to always to share what we had, and I try to teach that to my children, my grandchildren. January 5th, 1945. The SS came down from the mountain, from this mountain called Mountain Santa Donna, to town, and met my mother and another woman. They said, go to get, they didn't know whose children these young people were. Go to get your children. They're all dead on top of the mountain. So these women went up and they took the bodies with the men who went, obviously. Then it took the bodies of all these young men, all killed by the SS, and brought them down to the town. Okay. Now those, and if you go to Borgotaro today, and you go to the cemetery, there is a chapel, and you see the names of these young people. So that's what impressed me. The Allies, they always tried to bomb every day a bridge. There is a bridge, a railroad bridge going across the town, and that's where the SS would get the supply. So they were trying to bomb that, and every day, I would assume with the British, we would try to destroy this bridge. They would let the bomb come down from their aircraft. They were not intelligent bombs, so I think for 7 or 8 months they hit everything by that bridge. They hit the town, they hit houses, they hit everything, but the bridge never was hit. When the SS retreated in April of 1945, what they did, they blew up the bridge, so the Allies could not go through. April 25th, that's when theoretically the war ended in that part of Italy. And we woke up in the morning, and all the churches were ringing their bells. So we knew that that was the end of the war, and people were very, very happy. So from there, then a couple of months later, my family, we moved down to the town in Borgo Taro, okay? And the following September, I started school. I was 6 years old, and we started regular school. I always remember I had a great teacher. It was Jack Solari. We call him Solareux. Okay, he was a tough teacher, but he was a great teacher. And you know, these big kids, they always didn't want to stay in school. Once in a while, they would raise their hand, and he said, "Can I go to the Camerino?" So there was this kid named Berto, and I know his nickname. I don't know his last name was today, Girini. He's still alive, and I told him the story, and he said yes. He raised his hand one day, and he said, "I want to go to the Camerino." And he had gone only 10 minutes before, so the teacher said, Berto, you cannot go. If you need to do it, you do it right here. So the guy we had at that time, the Hink with the well, he takes the well and he does it right there in front of the girls and everything else. So you can imagine the reaction of the teacher, what happened. And the sad part about the war is that the war did not end in 1945. Italy was going through a troubled time because of that before was a kingdom, now became a republic. And there were really two factions, the communists and the Christian Democrats. It was not a funny time for Italy. And I remember vividly like today, I had two of my brothers, we were 7 brothers, no sisters. 2 of my brothers were priests, and they informed my mother that if the communists would win, the first 2, 3, that's what they would hang my brothers, the priest. So that's a sad time that you remember. It's nice to tell these stories, but it was a very, very sad time for us. Then, after I finished my 5 years of elementary school in Borgo Taro, I didn't ask my parents because they wouldn't ask me. They sent me to the Salesian boarding school in La Spezia. There were 40 kids from Borgo Taro. There were, I don't know, altogether maybe 200 kids, but 40 were from Borgo Taro. And because we used to talk dialect among ourselves, the teachers, they told us, you cannot do that. You cannot talk, because when we spoke our dialect, they could not understand what we were doing. People said, how was your youth? Meanwhile, I should go back. When I was in middle school, my father died. I was not even 12 years old. And the night before, I had come home from school, and the night before is that he called me in his room. I guess he knew he was dying, and he told me, he said, you have to go to, you have to study, like two of your brothers did. He said, and devi fare onore alla famiglia Berzolla e all'Italia. You have to bring honor to your family and to your nation. And I always remember that. So I went to the Lyceum, from the Lyceum 5 years, which is 5 years in, which is the same as high school, 1 year more. I went to the Polytechnic of Milan, which is an engineering school in Milan. And after the second year, I decided to come here. The question is, why did you decide to come here? I met my wife there. She was an American girl who was on vacation in Italy, in Borgotaro. I met in the summer of 1960, and we got along well for 2 or 3 months, and then she returned here. She came back to Italy the following year. Then I decided that we would eventually get married and I would move to United States. Why could I come to United States? It's very simple. Both of my parents were American citizens. My mother was already born in New York City. My father had become a citizen in 1933, so I decided to come here, and I live with one of my brothers here and my sister-in-law. And then in 1963, I married my wife, Andrea, and we are married for 54 years. And we have 4 kids and 14 grandchildren. We have 4 tribes. That's the way we address them. So that's what basically what is my history, how I came here. It was really, I was not going to come here because of love, my wife. That's what it was. Okay, you can give a lot of explanations. And when I studied for 1 year English, because my second language, believe it or not, was not English, it was French. So I communicate, my wife did not speak Italian at that time, so we communicate in French. It was my second language, and my wife could speak some French. So that's how we communicate at the beginning. So when I came here, I went for 8 months to private English school in order to resume university. And I eventually got a bachelor in engineering from Manhattan College and a master's degree in engineering from NYU. I recall coming here, I didn't consider myself as an immigrant because being an American, I didn't never consider myself an immigrant, but I heard some beautiful story of immigrants. One is about my father-in-law. My father-in-law, his brother and brother-in-law owned up to 3 restaurants in New York City, and they were partners. The brother-in-law of my father-in-law got sick at 55. He got Parkinson and he could not work anymore. He eventually died in late 1980. For 30 years, the 2 brothers, my father-in-law and his brother, paid their brother-in-law full salary and a profit, even though he never worked one day. That tells you the story of good people. A lot of people ask me why I become a deacon. My first answer was for the money, which is joke, nothing. Okay, so because it is a voluntary thing, and now you go to school for 4 years, basically learning about theology and so on, and you do this while you are working and going at night and so on. But I became a deacon because I really believe in my heart and that if a person does not have faith, okay, life has no meaning. That's now people may think differently, but that's the way I think. And I thought that by becoming a deacon, which in the Catholic Church you are an ordained minister, I would first of all become more involved myself with my spiritual life, and also help other people in the community and at work. And many times it is difficult not to really make the two match. If you're a professor, if you're president of a company and you're a deacon, and you have perhaps to fire someone who has a family, and you know for other reasons that you have to let that person go, it becomes a struggle for the person inside, for the what is inside you, because here you have to make a decision. But I always try to keep my diaconate teaching part of my life. And I think people that work with me and for me realize all that throughout the life, that was the type of person I was. I became a deacon for my spiritual betterment, and also to help other people to become involved spiritually more perhaps in their lives. Okay, that's what it was. That brought me also to do a lot of work in the community. Okay, in the community of Greenwich. And because a part of this things that I did a deacon, I would go to see elderly people in their house, talk to them. Now, people, maybe they have their children far away, they'll spend an hour, a weekend with them to teach, to talk to them, to listen to their problem, perhaps even to go shopping for them. Small things like that in the community, and also even get involved with the children. I got involved with the children, become involved and become a soccer coach in Old Greenwich for many, many years. So I try to do that for the community. And throughout this, my wife was really the one who supported me, because she was quite involved in all of this. Maybe I was debating when you asked me the questions to tell you this or not, but last October, for Columbus Day, the town recognized me, and Mr. Tassi, who's the first selectman, named that day Renato Berzolla Day in Greenwich. And they gave me a beautiful reception at night. And for me, it was really not because of the honor they gave me, but was really making me realize that I had done something which in the community. So then it was for me a very, very important happening that day. As a deacon, perhaps people don't know, I could baptize in the Catholic Church, and I could be married or witness marriages. So I witnessed the marriage of a lot of young people. And it was, for me, that was a beautiful thing, because what happened then, I baptized the children of the young people and I married them. And many times you said, and I also preach, I just preach, we have an Italian Mass every third week here in St. Catherine, which is our parish in Greenwich, and I also preach at the main church. But you never know if the message goes across. And just 2 years ago, a young man here, he's 45, 48 years old, came back, and he lived in South Carolina. He came back and he stopped me, said, "Do you recognize me?" And I had to be truthful, not, because I had not seen him for 20 years. And he told me one thing, he said, "Do you know Renato?" They called me. Said, "I remember one homily that you gave. That hit me. You just said one time, I don't know what the subject was, but you said you travel with your professional business, you travel all over the world. And when you came back and you were over the Mayanus River with the limo and you saw the steeple of St. Catherine, you say, I am home. He said, I am away for many, many years. When I went across that bridge and I saw the steeple of St. Catherine, I said, I am home. So these are the stories that the young people, and some was very, very interesting. I had to baptize children of mixed marriages, Jewish people with Catholic priests, and I always try to make baptism or marriage is something that unites people, not separates. So it could be because of different religions that there could be a struggle between the families. So I always sat down with the parents or grandparents of a different religion and sat and explain to them what we are doing, the connection between our Jewish religion and the Christian religions. And again, another story, a man who was Jewish and his son had been baptized by me, and he told me a story after many years. He said, you know, you invite me to come and you explain to me what baptism is and what is important for the family. He said, I never forgot that. And today, I'm not going to become Catholic, but I come to the Catholic Church once in a while. So this is a Jewish man. So those are the nice stories that you're doing with the community and so on, that you create all that. So I have a lot of young people that I know, and some I have helped them, and with the help of my wife, that they were involved in certain things which perhaps they're hard to say, but I recall the one time we lived next to Eastern Middle School. My wife and I were coming home and we saw this young girl. She was in middle school. How old could she be? 13, 14? And she is crying in front of. So my wife took her and said, what happened? And she said, I had an abortion. And I cannot tell my parents. And I think I want to speak to you. So, and she spoke to us and so on. Then eventually I guess she spoke to her. But you see, these are things that, that you try to help the people. A young girl, I know she is now, and she always remind me of that day. I said, you remember that? She said, yes, I remember that. No, go back there, I said to her. So, but these are the stories, okay? So, yeah. When I came from Italy to US, I went to live with my brother and sister-in-law in Queens, in Woodside, okay, until I got married. And then we moved, we lived in the Bronx a couple of years, then we moved to Larchmont, and finally we moved here to Greenwich in 1974. Because of my involvement a little bit about Greenwich, okay, this community, and also because I traveled with my job an enormous amount of time, and I always tell the story. In 2005, when it was the last year that I worked full-time, I traveled real miles, 295,000 miles in 1 year. So it tells you how much I travel. So I never had the opportunity to connect with the family club. Oh, I never did. I started to get involved really after basically I retired, okay? So that's whereas before I had no time. This is not that I disregarded. And while my brother belonged to that because he lived in Queens, I couldn't because I was not around. I was, I think, successful because of the work I did, to be also at the right time, in the right place, and so on. So I work for different companies because I always look at opportunities to grow professionally. And I end up in 94 to found my own company, and then become a partners with an Italian company which had branches in Nice, France, or Carreau, really to be specific, and one in Chicago, and the main, the headquarter was in Bologna. So, and I was a partner there, and I enjoyed that part of my life the most, okay, because I could be at that point 110% myself. When you work for different company and you have different CEO, so you always have to try to please them in a certain way. So even though you try to be as sincere as you can, you always have to be careful. I would say the last career in my life, I enjoyed that because I was really myself. You always say, what did the people think of you? Okay, because you think you're always the greatest person in the world. No, everyone thinks that, no? So I always give the example. I work before I had my own company. I worked for 4 companies. Today, people that I work with in the 4 company, they always invite me back for Christmas party every year. And they always, many of them, send me Christmas cards that, no, we're going back to 1965 when I graduated from the university. So that's how far it is. But one engineer years ago told me the truth. And he said, I asked him, he said, what do you think? He was not working for me. He had worked for me for 15 years, this engineer. Great guy. He said, Paul said, tell me the truth about when I was in charge, was president and so on. He said, first of all, I have to tell you, you were the toughest boss I ever had, the fairest boss I ever had. You gave us what was expected from you or the company, but also you were always concerned about our families. You also asked, when you had a party, you didn't invite only the marketing engineering managers, you invited their families, their children, and so on. But you were a tough boss. And you remember when you left the company, we worked together. Do you remember? He's asking me what we gave you. A whip. And I have a whip in my office today. So, okay, so, but that's my professional. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my work, and I think I started this conversation. I tried to be truthful to the 3 things: to my family, my faith, and my work, and that's what I did. I consider myself an operative Christian. What it means, even though I know a lot of theology, I take what was taught us in the gospel and I make it operative. I said, what does it mean for me today? And I do that. And that's my faith. No, I don't know. Many times I break a lot of rules. My bishop knows, so when he talks about me, he says, when you ask a question to Renato, that's the Catholic Church according to Renato. It's not so, but that's because that's the way I am. So, but that's where it is. But that's basically I try to make operative the gospel. That's my faith. Your roots are your roots. I came to United States when I was 21 years old, and even though I spent most of my life in the United States and so on, there is something in my heart which tells me you are Italian. That's the way it is. I cannot change that. I cannot change my heart, okay? Borgo Taro is in the province of Parma. Many times when people ask me where I come from, I started saying I come from Parma, then I go to Borgo Taro. But as soon as they hear the word Parma, they say, oh, that's the city of prosciutto, ham, and cheese. And I said, well, that's correct, but we are not important because of cheese and ham. We are important because we are the city of music. If you record, Verdi was born in Busseto, which is a part of Parma, and he is the biggest opera music that we have even today. They come from Verdi. Then Toscanini also came, and he came from Italy, and he left because they wanted him to sing and to play before a concert in Italy the fascist hymn, and he said he would not do that, so he had to immigrate to United States and then became involved with the Philharmonic Hall and Metropolitan Opera House here in United States and in New York. From 1861, okay, when there was the unifications of Italy, Italy theoretically is one. But reality is different. Anybody can say different, and it is there's still a very competition between one region and another, not only one region and another, between towns. Even in our valley, you talk about having this, we call it campanilismo. Campanile is the church tower where the bells are, and everybody congregates around their own bell tower. If I come 10 minutes away by car, I am a foreigner. We are lucky enough that all my children and grandchildren lived in the same town, Greenwich. They're all here, okay? So we get together always. We have a place in Italy on the coast called Lerici, and I make sure that my grandchildren come every year to see what it is. And Borgo Taro is 52 kilometers away from where we are, and when they ask me, where are we going today? So we are going to the capital of Italy, Borgo Taro. I said it so many times that one of my grandchildren, until he was 12 years old, he really thought that the capital of Italy was Borgo Taro. And I teach them the language. Most of the, not all of them, most of them speak some Italian. I have two which have a name McDermott, and they speak Italian fluently, okay? Not only that, but last year there are two boys, the children of my daughter, one of my daughters, now they want to learn the dialect. And last year I taught them certain phrases, and when they went to meet the people in my town, in Borgo Taro, instead of saying, how do you do, come stai, they were not, come te ste, which is, and my friends were just shocked that they learned. So we constantly, my wife and I constantly try to teach them not only the language, the place, and the culture, but also what are our values, okay? And I tell the story of that I said before about my father, my father-in-law. I tell them those stories because that's what makes a person what it is. That's what Italians are all about. Italians, they have a big heart. So I try to teach them that because that's important. And I think they know. And my wife has every time we sit down for Christmas, every Christmas we were 24, only our families, she starts to talk to children and grandchildren, and she always gives advices. And my children, with their humor, he said, this is Sermon 34, Mom. He said, why don't say, they say 34 and we remember what it is. Because she always tells them that. Not only that, but my wife, who was born here, her mother was already born, but she comes from the same, her father and grandfathers came from the same region I came from. She was the one, with other two ladies from Greenwich, who founded in Greenwich an organization called Gli Amici del Libro, the Friends of the Books, which brought Italian books to the Greenwich Library. Greenwich Library, which has, in Greenwich, where there were a lot of Italian extraction, did not have a section of books. So she was the one who started all this here. And she worked very, very hard. And at the end, when they had the opening for this is years ago, of the library organized a night. They told there would be 30 or 40 people. They had champagne and so on. There were more than 2,000 people. They were all outside. And the Greenwich Time, the day after, had a title, which I still remember, said, "The Italians have arrived in Greenwich." No, they had arrived in 1800. Okay, but that's to say that it was as I tell you, and I have to say this, my wife, in a way, teaches the Italian culture to children and grandchildren and everything more than I do. She is really is hard Italian. When my father, the night before he eventually died, and I didn't know, he left me those words, "Fai onore alla famiglia e all'Italia." And that's what I try to do in my professional life, in my everyday life. I try to do that, to bring honor to my family, but also to Italy, and especially to Borgo Taro. My wife and I try to maintain this umbilical cord to Borgo Taro. We do. No, I take my children, "You have to go to the barber in Borgo Taro." "No, I don't want to go because they cut my hair." "I don't care." You do that. You have to, and a lot of people, unfortunately, I have to say, even from our hometown, they do not do that. They are busy. I understand that. You are busy, you have family and so on. But I think if we want our culture to be for the future, we have to teach our children. And some families do not do it. And I think that's a lack. I always use the French as an example. That's not the Borgo Taro, it's the Italians. The French are tremendous. They are a united nation, united people. In United States, they have the Alliance Française, which teaches the language, the culture, everything about France. In Italy, we do not have that. We still compete, even family with family, like we are different kingdoms. And that really impacts, I think, in our way of life as Italians in the United States. In Italian, they say, "Tu sei dell'Alta Italia." You are from the north. What does it mean? So I give me I give me a lesson about the southern part of Italy. Say, first of all, you came up with this because your parents and grandparents told you that the people from the north are better than the south. That's not true. And I give you examples, okay? Who is the president of Italy today? Is from Sicily. Okay? He is not. Who is who are the best politicians that we have, the best poets that we have in the last 100 years? None come from the north. None come from the north. Okay, so why do you come up with this separation? If you want to say intellectually, I know when you generalize, you always make a mistake, but intellectually, the South is much more progressive than the North. The North is much more progressive economically, and maybe in today's world, economics is more important than intellect. In my view, it's not, but that's what keeps separations. I would really like to appeal to the people, even in our valley and so on, to try not to be so campanilistici, so just, it is our town, it is our valley. No, there is a valley next door, which is as good as our valley. there is another valley. So we have to embrace everybody, because we cannot be so parochial to only to think about, and I have to say, Borgo Taro or Parma. We have to think about Italy. That's my message. I know some people will not like that, but that's me.